Right, well, joining me now to have a further look at today's papers is the political commentator, Nathaniel Ogunniyi. Good morning, Nathaniel. How are you?
Very good, James. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. Let's start with the story on the front of the Times this morning. Go for the jugular, Sunak urged, is the headline. Reportedly, senior Tories and cabinet ministers want him to launch more direct personal attacks against Keir Starmer. Just 2.5 weeks to go now until polling day, a fortnight on Thursday. Of course, is polling day, and yet again it seems the Conservatives are toying with another change of strategy. Do you think personal attacks maybe over Keir Starmer's previous support for Jeremy Corbyn or over his track record as a human rights lawyer? Do you think that's the way to go?
Yeah, so I think Starmer does have a few skeletons in his closet in that sense. You might remember Sunak talking about Starmer's support for Abu Qatada. So one of the people that Starmer worked for as a lawyer was a man called Abu Qatada. He sort of was the head of a terrorist group, for want of a better word. They're actually prescribed as a terrorist group in the UK now. He was called Bin Laden's right-hand man, which is not quite what you want, I think, the leader of your opposition to be doing. But I suppose it strikes at the heart of the issue. Either politicians' backgrounds in terms of employment are fair or not, fair game or not. You see Labour were coming after Sunak for some of his work in finance. Their first party political broadcast was effectively saying, Rishi Sunak is a finance bro. I don't think that's news to anyone who's interested in politics. So, yeah, I suppose either you go for people's backgrounds or you don't. And I think Labour have gone for Sunak, so it's only fair if it happens the other way around.
So as far as you're concerned, it's fair game. You can go at people's backstory, you can go at their previous employment. That is on the table.
Well, when it's stuff that they've chosen to do, then yes, right? So, I think if there are immutable characteristics about people's backgrounds, their parents, for instance, that's unfair, right? Because you don't choose your parents. But if you, and in this case, Labour have gone for someone based on their background, you can't complain when they do the same thing to you.
Do you think it would work? Do you think negative campaigning does work? I mean, I was saying this earlier. Much as people say, if you ask voters, do you want a negative campaign? Do you like personal attacks? They say no, we don't like it. But actually, that history suggests, both in this country and in the US in particular, negative campaigning can be incredibly effective.
Yeah, so I mean, it's effective for a reason, right? It cuts through. It cuts through on any given day. There'll be maybe hundreds of news stories trying to cut through, but one linking Keir Starmer to working for a terrorist group isn't something that you see every day, right? And so all of a sudden that sticks in the mind.
Well, he wasn't working for a terrorist group, in fairness. I mean, he may have been defending someone accused of terrorist acts, but that was through his role as a human rights lawyer. I mean, just to be clear, he wasn't working for a terrorist group.
Yeah, so I suppose that's a fair clarification to make. He wasn't working directly for Hizbut al-Tahrir, I think is what it is, or something. But he wasn't working directly for them. He was just working for Bin Laden's right-hand man, which I suppose is a good clarification, but I'm not sure it's significantly better.
Well, it will be interesting to see if that is an attack that Rishi Sunak does make in the coming days and weeks. Morning to Pierre on WhatsApp, who says, on the suggested personal attacks on Starmer, even though it might be effective, it's too late for that. It only shows how desperate the Tories are. Rishi should focus his energy on planning his next move after politics. And Martin says Labour will, of course, be prepared for the election campaign to turn nastier, including personal attacks by Sunak against Starmer. It would be naive to believe otherwise. Keep your messages coming, please. 0333 003 2353. I want to come on, Nathaniel, to an interesting comment piece in the Times this morning by Edward Lucas under the headline, Lib Dems are shaping up as the real opposition. Now, we had this MRP poll by Survation over the weekend, which showed that Labour are on course potentially, and of course it's just one poll, but, others have indicated similar, on course for a huge majority of around 260. The Conservatives reduced in this poll to just 72 seats, and the Lib Dems not that far behind. So there is speculation the Lib Dems may even, if things go even worse for the Conservatives from here, may even overtake the Tories and be the main opposition party in the House of Commons after the next election. Do you think that's realistic?
Well, I'm sure the Lib Dems would like it to be, but I don't quite think it is. I suppose you see a number of these polls will say various things. The real votes on the 4th of July. I suppose no votes have yet been cast. These things are interesting. These MRPs are interesting, but I think we should look a bit about their methodology. They don't take into account the strong personal relationships that lots of current MPs have versus their opponents who are trying to tweet things or visiting primary schools for the first time. When you look at the incumbency factor, just the fact that you've been an MP for a while in a constituency, you know where to campaign, you know where not to. I think gives a lot of MPs a leg up compared to what the MRP might suggest they are. And equally, there are a good number of seats where we look at the MRP and we know they're probably wrong. Jeremy Corbyn's seat, Islington North, is a good example.
That's a really interesting point you raised there, Nathaniel. I mean, I suppose the counter-argument would be, because you're right, there often is a bit of an incumbency boost if someone is regarded as a good constituency MP. The counter-argument might be, I remember in 2015, loads of Lib Dems saying, oh no, even though the poll ratings aren't very good, they'll hold on because, a lot of their MPs were well regarded in their constituency. And of course, they were essentially wiped out in that election. So how much do you really think that counts for?
I think if you're in a marginal, so if, there are, and in this MRP, there are a great number, if you're within, say, 2,000 votes, that can probably swing it for you, right? That can swing it for you one way or the other. If you're trying to overturn 15,000 majority, then that's more difficult. But where the margins are quite small, I think an incumbency factor is quite important.
Yeah, and I think we're going to touch on this a bit later on with Dr. Nigel Fletcher from the Centre for Opposition Studies. But, if you do end up with a situation of Labour having a huge majority, an historic majority of 200 plus, what does that mean for effective opposition in the House of Commons after the next election? Because, even Labour supporters would want, it's important that you have an effective opposition, surely.
Yes, so you might have heard Sunak over the last few days using the line about not writing Labour a blank cheque. And I think that is him sort of starting to acknowledge that actually, if you end up with a Labour government, a very large majority, then it does mean that it's more difficult to scrutinise them, right? Because you just don't have the numbers. And I suppose one of the articles in the Times this morning talked a bit about the Lib Dems providing that opposition, which I'm not so sure. I'm not so sure they can. You sort of look at the Lib Dems, and lots of their electoral strategy right now just seems to be to get any media attention they can. I think they were at Chessington World of Adventures the other day, which I can't blame them for.
I think it might have been Thorpe Park, but yeah,
really?
They're basically the same thing. You can kind of, but do you not think it's working though? Ed Davey, whether you like it or not, he's getting more coverage because of it. He was having a makeover on This Morning the other day.
So I suppose we're talking about them, but when I think about who I want to be my member of parliament, I probably think of someone slightly more serious than someone going around the teacups or on the rides. I suppose, yes, it gets them the media attention, but will that convert into votes? I don't think so. I think it's there's a difference between looking at someone and laughing with them and laughing at them. I'll leave you to draw your own conclusions on which one that might be. But on the serious opposition point, I suppose, committees within Parliament do a lot of work on detailed scrutiny, whether that's ahead of legislation or holding ministers to account on policy decisions. But seats within committees are decided based on party representation. So if you have a large majority in the House overall, then you have a large majority on committees overall. And so that sort of makes it difficult for opposition MPs to hold you to account.
And just finally, Nathaniel, we can't look at today's papers without talking about Jude Bellingham, because his photo is on the front page of pretty much every single paper this morning. Were you watching last night? Are you into the Euros?
I must confess, I was not. To my father's disappointment, I'm more of a rugby fan than a football one. Although, to be honest, he's an Arsenal fan, so I think he's been disappointed in other ways since I was born.
Yeah, well, okay. No, fair enough. It is always funny when you got a major tournament on, and I love it, but I'm always conscious there are some people for whom the next 4 weeks are just going to be hell, because everywhere you look, there's the Euros. But if you ask me, that's no bad thing. Nathaniel, really appreciate your time. Thank you so much.
No worries. Great to speak.
That's the political commentator Nathaniel Ogunniyi there.